everybody, welcome to Our Culture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Also joined in our collective lives with the PlayStation VR 2, which Mr. Josh Brown has been playing with for about a week or so now, I think.
I'm becoming dangerously obsessed with it, Scott Tailford. I'm starting to not understand the change between reality and virtual reality at this point. I look at my hands and I think, who are these? Who do these belong to? Who are these? Who do these belong to?
Picking up every single thing in the office and just throwing it across the room.
Smashing plates,
to see whether you can or not.
Sticking two fingers up and everything. Just a regular
Will
day.
YouTube flag that? I don't know. After the first 5 seconds. But I thought we'd do a big old Q&A because obviously there's a whole bunch of review coverage out there for the PlayStation VR 2, but I thought we'd just ask the people what they want to know over on the YouTube community page and also over on Twitter, and we got a whole lot of questions. So these are all very specific things, but I think they're all very helpful in regards to helping you decide whether you want to drop the money on the PlayStation VR 2 or just what it's like using the system overall. So the first one from ABW13 who says, how is the fit on your head? Does it cause headaches from pressure or motion sickness? Also, a lot of people are asking about general motion sickness. Does the VR make you feel sick in general? Just one of the offsets, I guess, of VR stuff in general is that it makes people feel a bit sick. And also, can you use your regular PlayStation 5 controller over the new Sense controllers?
Lots of questions within that big question, which are all very, very good. I want to start with the nausea because, unfortunately, I don't think that's something we're ever going to get away from fully, and the PlayStation VR 2 specifically does have a few kind of like differences from the VR 1 that does make it a little bit easier to ease yourself into. The haptics on the headset itself, I find, are quite helpful because it like rumbles and makes you feel like you're part of the space a little bit more. But I think just since the PSVR 1 came out, developers especially have fully understood what causes people to be nauseous and what causes people to have a nicer time. So in most of the games I played, there are so many options that tweaks, for instance, the field of view or the vignette feature, which essentially narrows your view and puts a black border around your view when you're moving to kind of lessen the sense of locomotion, I suppose. I don't think it's going to completely eradicate it for people who still suffer with nausea when they're playing the system, but there are a lot of accessibility features there that ease people into it, and you still will have to get your VR legs, as it's known, kind of like you would get your C legs, and stop being nauseous that way. So you will still need to ease yourself in. You're not going to be able to jump in and play 5 hours of Resident Evil 8 off the bat, but there are a lot of accessibility features in there that are heavily customizable in a way that they weren't 6 years ago.
That's good. I think one of the things that made me immediately sick with the PSVR 1 was trying to play first-person shooter stuff where I'm spinning around, I'm upside down, I'm doing things that my regular brain wouldn't do. So there's obviously like an onboarding process to it overall. What about using a regular PlayStation 5 controller with the PSVR 2?
You can. Like for Gran Turismo 7, you can use, it actually doesn't work with the Sense controllers at all. You're just steering with the thumbsticks, and you can get a wheel, of course, if you wanted to do that. I don't necessarily think you can use it to override games that are specifically made with the Sense controllers in mind, so I don't think you could play something like Resident Evil without the Sense controllers. I might be wrong about that, but if you're able to use the Sense controllers, you should definitely use the Sense controllers because they rule.
Plus, they also have haptic feedback and everything in, so it's like they're trying to get up to be on par with the DualSense controller in a VR version. Next question from Mr. Nips, who says, does it have anti-fog glass this time? PSVR 1 was like stars in your eyes, and I'm not Matthew Kelly.
Very good. The first time, Scott Tailford, I think I messaged you about the PSVR 2. My biggest rush of excitement was over the fact that the lenses didn't fog, because this person is right. Like, one of the biggest issues with PSVR 1 that just impeded immersion at every step was how you couldn't play if you were in a little bit of a warm room, or even if you were just sweating a little bit.
If you're a hot man.
If you're a hot girl person, you would just fog those glasses up like nobody's business. And you have to keep taking the headset off, keep wiping them down, putting it back on. It was a nightmare, and it kind of stopped me personally playing as much PSVR 1 as I wanted to. Fortunately, PSVR 2 has almost completely eradicated that entirely. It's nowhere near as bad. The first 2-hour session that I had with the system, I got no fog at all, which was really welcome because there is a ventilation thing built into the headset now that tries to alleviate it. The way it's built tries to alleviate that from ever happening. That said, that's not to say there's no fog at all. If you're playing something like Pistol Whip, which is very intensive, like I said, if you're in a hot area, you might get a little bit of fog on the outer rim, which you will have to wipe down, but it's not, going to completely obfuscate the entire screen like it did before, and it's way more infrequent. Like, once you do kind of like cool down or whatever, you'll stop getting that kind of outer rim thing, and that's only happened to me once or twice across my entire playthrough, again, because it was a really intensive game where I was sweating all the time.
Yeah, I love the idea of them building in a ventilation system.
Yeah.
Very Iron Man suit. Question from Josh Youngman, who says, what's it like playing a non-VR first-person game, i.e. a first-person shooter, using the headset? I was thinking it could add extra immersion.
So we're talking about
the
like
FPS genre.
Are we using like the cinematic mode? Is that what they mean here? Or
I
are we talking?
guess what the idea, because you can boot up various other games
Yes.
that you already own in VR. So I guess the idea is, have you tried something like a first-person shooter just with the VR headset on?
I've not tried a first-person shooter, but I have tried Dead Space in the cinematic mode, and it's quite cool because it essentially simulates you looking at like a massive IMAX screen. So the way it does it, you put your headset on, you get like a great big screen, which obviously feels larger than it will look if you just kind of put it on like a regular
pressing
screen
your face
or whatever.
against the TV.
Essentially, yeah. And if because of the scale that VR awards you, it does feel like you're in this kind of vacuumless room with this giant screen. It's a interesting way to play it. I wouldn't personally use it too much because you do get a little bit of a hit on the resolution, even though the colors in the HDR kind of looks incredible. It's an atmospheric way to play something like Dead Space. I'm not sure how it would translate to a first-person shooter. It's interesting as an option, and I'm glad it's there, but it's not going to be for everyone necessarily because, you know, you could just take it off and look at your television. But if you're in a room like I am sometimes with a partner who wants to use the telly, it's quite cool to be able to use the cinematic mode and then have the television used for something else because you don't need the television for VR, obviously, because the screen is inside your little headset. So it's cool to kind of split the difference that way.
Yes. Also, if you just don't have a big gargantuan TV like the freaks that we are, you could use the PSVR 2 to just get a bigger screen in front of you anyway. Next question from Payne's Place, who says, can you play PSVR One games on it at all?
Unfortunately not, Scott Tailford. There are a few PSVR 1 games that have been updated with all of the PSVR 2 features, but I think just because of the hardware limitations of the PSVR 1, like the Move controllers didn't even have thumbsticks. Like a lot of those games are going to be more difficult to kind of transfer over from a backwards compatibility standpoint. I do think that kind of sucks because there are so many great PSVR 1 titles that could have benefited from a major update that might not get it. I mean, I loved Resident Evil 7, you know, I loved playing Super hot Iron Man VR was incredible. I'd love to play that with the new controllers, but unfortunately there's only a select few titles right now and that are coming from PSVR 1's era that are coming over. But the ones that come over do make full use of the PSVR 2's systems. You know, Pistol Whip came out on PSVR 1, but it plays so much better on PSVR 2. So those updates are worthwhile. Unfortunately, a lot of the updates are free, and if they're not free, they kind of come at a little bit of a discount. So I hope that's the norm going forward.
Yeah, it's a bit like all the cross-gen releases where, like, you know, something like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot just got a new gen release or whatever. Question from JP, does it actually feel next-gen? It took a while, and it's maybe still not quite there for the PlayStation 5 itself to feel like it's doing something different than previous consoles. Is the PSVR 2 a big enough jump?
I think so, but it's not like it is a night and day jump, right? But if you played PSVR 1, it will feel familiar. It's not like the jump, in my opinion, from a PlayStation 1 to a PlayStation 2 or anything like that. It's more like the jump from a PS4 to a PS5. And I know you said in the question there that you don't feel the PS5's quite got there yet, but you do jump into some titles like Call of the Mountain that look incredible and don't look like they could have been accomplished at all on the PSVR 1. And if you compare something like Resident Evil 8 on PSVR 2 compared to Resident Evil 7 on PSVR 1, which I really enjoyed, the graphical update in particular is like incredible. Like the resolution, the sharpness of the new image, the colors especially, which I'll keep going on about. It does feel next gen, but it's not like perhaps where some people might want it to be, because this is still relative to other headsets that are out there, and some of the headsets do things better than the PSVR 2 does just because of the price point or tech limitations or whatever. The real next-gen update for me comes in the hardware itself. It is stuff like the defogging, it is stuff like the reliable controllers and the tracking. So it's not really from an image quality perspective, from my opinion. It's from a reliability perspective from the hardware itself and how it, to steal a phrase, just works. You know, it actually just works, which PSVR 1 didn't.
You do have stuff like the eye tracking and the foveated rendering, where it'll try and render exactly what you're looking at to try and save on the processing power and things like that too.
Those definitely feel next gen. Like the eye tracking feels like a sci-fi feature because it's so reliable and it's so like sci-fi. Like I said, you know, looking at a menu with your eyeballs and being able to kind of choose, navigate the UI that way rather than using a thumbstick or even pointing is really good, as is the foveated rendering, which, like you said, you know, it kind of only hyper details the stuff you're actually looking at. So the stuff that's in your periphery vision won't be as detailed, but you won't actually notice it because you're obviously you're not looking there. So it's saving the rendering power by funneling it somewhere else. Unfortunately, not all games use it, but most of them do at launch, and you can definitely tell the games that use it compared to the games that don't because it's just that little bit sharper.
Okay, that's cool. Next question from Zach Hayworth, who says, one of my biggest problems with the first PlayStation VR is the screen door effect due to the visible pixels. I know the screens are a massive improvement in PSVR 2, but have they remedied this problem? What even is this problem, Josh Brown?
This problem is, in the original, let me try to explain what the screen door effect is, right? In the original PSVR and some of the headsets, you would notice the gaps between pixels, so it'll kind of look like you were looking at the image through, not as egregious as your fingers, but if you kind of did that, it would kind of look like there was a gate up, essentially, a screen door, as it were. And for my money, they have gotten rid of that. I don't notice the gaps between pixels, but there is another effect called Mura, as it's known online, which essentially kind of looks as though your head is in a bit of a like a cloth. Like, when robbers kind of head in movies where like what do we even call them? Like stockings on their head to obscure their identity. Sometimes it does look like there's a little bit of a wet cloth on it in dark areas, which can be off-putting. The best way to describe it would be in games where there's film grain and you kind of notice the little artifacts like that. That's gonna be a problem depending on how much that stuff bothers you. I can get immersed in a game where I notice it now and again, but when you move your head or when you move your character, it'll kind of disappear and fade into the background like some, visual artifacts in real life does. But some people will notice that and get caught up on it, so that is something to be aware of, that hasn't gone away, nor has necessarily the bloom on certain bright images. Like if you're looking at Resident Evil, I keep going back to that game, but if you're looking at Resident Evil's pause menu, for instance, which is white text against a black background with white text boxes, that's going to kind of bloom a little bit. It doesn't quite fade between the colors perfectly. Still, those are still issues of the tech. They're not deal breakers for me, but they are worth noting.
Excuse me, I think stuff like that is it taps into that idea that you want a VR headset to just literally be another reality you can put on your head. And we're getting there. We're way further towards that than we've ever been before. But like you said, sometimes when you're just looking at an image for so long or looking at a screen for so long, you'll pick up on things like that.
It does look like you're peering into another world through kind of obtuse means sometimes because of that Mura effect, because of the bloom, and because of obviously the fact that you're still very aware that you're looking through a pair of goggles and you've kind of got this black latex thing around your eyes. So it's not like, plugging into it. It's not a brain chip. It's not like you're plugging into the Matrix or anything like that, but it still is very impressive. It's just, I think in the hype cycle, perhaps this is Sony's fault as well, it allows your imagination to kind of get away from you, especially if you haven't tried VR before, don't really have a reference point. I remember when I jumped into VR1, which I ended up loving. I remember the first time I tried it, I thought I wasn't prepared for exactly how it was going to look, that it was going to be through this kind of lens. And I know that might sound
or something.
I know that might sound stupid, but if you don't have that first-hand experience, you just don't know what to expect. You kind of think that it might just be literally plugging into a new world and having it open in front of you. It's not quite there, obviously, but once you come to terms with that, I think it's still incredibly impressive, incredibly immersive. In the sense of scale, it's just really good.
Yeah, man. I think overall, VR as it's portrayed in movies, TV, entertainment, whatever, there is that assumption that you're just going to not even be aware of the world you're in when this other thing renders in. And you can obviously get lost in games, but it's not necessarily going to be that immediately. Question from Chewy Said It First. Two-parter. One, your unbiased first initial thought, and also what's your unbiased opinion at the time of filming?
My unbiased first thought was it wasn't as much of a jump in screen technology as I expected from the PlayStation VR. Like I said, it was very familiar with the experience that I had, and it took a little while to kind of get used to the idea that it wasn't going to be as crisp as an image looks on my television. You know what I mean? Like you go from a pretty decent telly that has, nice 4K, really good HDR, and you go to this and you kind of, at least I expected it to be of the same resolution, of the same kind of standard of frame rate, and it is not the same as looking at something on telly. but it's really good still, and it's way better than PSVR 1 was, and it's way better than some of the other headsets out there. So once I kind of adjusted to the fact that, oh, of course, this is what VR looks like, now I'm of the opinion that, yeah, it is an upgrade. It is a substantial leap. It is way more reliable, and it does look great. You know, like playing something like Pistol Whip or Call of the Mountain or, you know, Resident Evil or Pavlov, which uses Unreal Engine 5. The lighting is excellent. The HDR implementation is awesome. When you're in a dark room and you're illuminating it with a flashlight, it does get that sense of depth and scale that does work. But yeah, I guess my first opinion was, my hype was up here and it should have been there.
And in terms of where you are right now, is it largely the same thing that you've accepted, like the limitations to some degree?
I think a popular sentiment with VR, especially that I've seen on the subreddit, the PlayStation VR subreddit, is that VR gets better the more time you spend with it, because it does take a little bit of adjusting. You're trying to find the sweet spot, which is where the image looks best for your particular eyes and eyesight, and it takes a few days to fully get the most out of the machine. So I think once you're over that kind of like transition, then you kind of just get to accept it, and more importantly, enjoy it, and you can kind of get to grips with it. And then at the point where I am now, I'm just thinking, this is a great bit of tech, and I'm
flipping off everybody.
I really am. Business. I'm excited to jump back into all the games that I've played, put it that way. You know what I mean? I want to live in those worlds more. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Next question from Only France, who says, do you think they will fluff this like they did with the PlayStation VR and its lack of top quality games, or have they learned, or will they learn from past mistakes? A lot of people asking about this, the general sort of launch lineup. You know, I guess I could extend it. And is there something that you think people need to play as well?
Well, first off, Sony has fluffed many things in the past, especially when it comes to peripheries. Do we need to talk about the PlayStation Vita? I don't think we do. That was a great system that didn't get as much support.
It's still a great system.
I'm not saying it's not. The PlayStation VR 1 was a great system.
Plenty games on it.
But that's the issue, right? That's the issue. Will it get supported in that way? Will it get that long-term investment that it needs? Honestly, at this point with the PSVR 2, I don't know. There are really good games on the horizon. You know, I'm really looking forward to this month to play the Not Until Dawn game. What is that called now? The Dark Pictures game.
Yes.
I want to play the new Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, and Sony have another, like a first-party game coming out called Firewall Ultra, which is a sequel to Firewall that was on the PSVR 1. That was really good, but it's a strange market right now. It's a difficult market. It's an expensive piece of kit. Will it be adopted enough for Sony to support it in the long run? I genuinely couldn't say that right now. I couldn't say you need to invest now because we're going to have 5-6 years worth of quality games. I just don't know. I know the games right now are great, though. There are a bunch of killer apps out there already. Like I said, I've picked up 5 games, and I'm excited to jump into all of them right now. And the launch lineup is incredibly strong, and there's so many more that will take me a good few months to get through. So I feel like the first year is sorted. After that, it's going to be wait and see.
I can't. The thing is, I don't know if they've got this in the pipeline. I don't know if this has been floated in various business meetings, but why is there not Spider-Man VR?
Ooh.
Why is there not an Insomniac developed, PlayStation 5 exclusive, PSVR 2 enabled Spider-Man game? That just feels like the most obvious thing that would turn every head in every country to be like, oh my god, I need to play this.
Make
that would
it
be the
happen.
thing that would make it work.
I agree, man. Like, get like, even if they're just kind of modes for those big first-party games. You know, we've got a Horizon game now. Excellent. Where do we go next? Do we get Spider-Man? Do we get Uncharted? Do we get The Last of Us? That would absolutely rule.
Probably Ratchet and Clank, I guess. The amount of like different tools and whatever you could use. That's a tool. That's a tool. You're pulling that bit and you're firing with that bit.
It could happen. It could happen, and I want to see it. I want Sony to give it that first-party support, because while the games are good now, a lot of them are third-party releases that are rolled and have been retooled. Pistol Whip, Pavlov, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, so many more to come. And you kind of want a system like this because you want to see what Sony can do in the VR space. You want to see them try to rival Half-Life Alyx, and if they don't, it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, plus like things like Astrobot made its name as a VR like selection of mechanics in the first place, so why not do something with that? Quick question from Tools and Tech, who says, which game is your favorite so far?
Hard, man, hard. It's a toss-up between Pavlov, which is this first-person shooter, COD 4, Counter-Strike style multiplayer thing, Pistol Whip, which I can't get enough of, man. That's like a rhythm first-person shooter. It makes me feel like the coolest dude on the planet planet, which if you're watching this, you know I'm not the coolest dude on the planet. I'm barely even
I was
top
just going to say,
5. You know what I mean?
outside of when I'm around.
But
still.
yeah. And Resident Evil 8, I've only scratched the surface of that, but Resi 7 was so good, and this is even better because you have way more implementation. So those are the 3 that I'm really interested in right now. If I had to pick one, it probably would be Pavlov. That's the biggest surprise, because ever since I played Firewall years ago, I've wanted the dream of, you know, playing a first-person shooter in VR and having full control of my character, which you do here, having full control of your weaponry, and it just adds that extra level of intensity to the firefights. You know, being able to peek around corners, being able to customize your weapons, being able to do tactical reloads,
Stealing someone else's ammo
stealing
out of their own gun. Yeah.
Oh man, there's nothing more satisfying than walking up to someone unaware, taking the magazine out of their weapon, and then like either stabbing them or shooting them in the head. Only in VR, may I add.
So
Don't
far.
do that in real life, but in VR, that's a thrill you just can't really get in flat screen gaming, which I love. Yeah, so that's been a really big surprise.
That level of interaction. Yeah, Pavlov is quite quickly becoming the thing that everyone can dive on because it's only £20 on the UK store.
Yes.
So, and it, like you said, it's very responsive, and it feels like, you know, if you just want a VR Call of Duty, it's pretty much that.
And that's a game as well, not to keep going on about it, but it's a game that really benefits from the PSVR 2 system, because obviously it's an old game, it's been out on a bunch of different consoles before, but it's the first PSVR 2 game, I think, to use Unreal Engine 5. They've updated the engine, so it visually looks really, really good, and the implementation of like the PSVR 2 features, like the headset rumble and haptics, is all great. So it plays really well, particularly on this machine, in a way that, you know, it probably definitely wouldn't have. I don't even think it ran on the PSVR 1, you know what I mean?
Right. Next question from Omega Gingy, who says, how is recording and streaming footage? Does it do the lens effect the PlayStation VR 1 did, or has that been fixed for PSVR 2? This will depend on whether you've exported any footage yet.
Well, this is the thing. I have, my friend. And I'll let you know that hopefully you'll have seen throughout this video the footage from the PSVR 2 that'll answer this question, because the PSVR 1, like you've alluded to there, looked like dog when you tried to record any
A dog
footage.
through binoculars.
It really did. Like, it had that vignette thing, and it wasn't very high resolution.
Right.
It looked like trash. Now, the issue kind of is that the exported footage looks better sometimes than what you see in there, which is why these expectations, I think, have been inflated a little bit, because the picture is so sharp, and it doesn't have any of those issues that PSVR 1 had. It looks like something you would want to play, whereas if you saw recorded footage of PSVR 1 games, you would never want to play them in a million years, because it's not conveyed at all. But this, the exported footage here, recording footage, it's spot on and where it needs to be.
Good. That's good. That's something that should be just straightforward.
Yeah.
Next question from Sean Ackland, who says, is it possible to lay down on your bed or couch with the PlayStation VR 2 and play non-VR games in cinematic mode comfortably?
It's possible. Would it be comfortable? Maybe not. You'd have a lot of pressure on your head. It's definitely doable, though. Like, the dream, I suppose, is, like they were saying, you know, sitting in bed, maybe on a dark night or an early morning, maybe sun's streaming in, but you want to play Dead Space, you put this on, and thankfully the headset itself does a way better job than the PSVR 1 of blocking out any incoming light. So even if you are in a bright room, which it's actually suggested you are, because the headset tracks better in a bright room, you don't see any of that. So it is possible. I haven't tried it myself, but it's certainly... It would be possible.
You could sit on the floor and go play Kayak VR and float around, stroking the dolphins. And a question from Miles Dyer, who says, have you played TTT mode in Pavlov VR yet?
Miles!
Whatever that is.
The issue with this, TTT mode, if I am thinking about this correctly, is Trouble in Terrorist Town, which is a Counter-Strike mode originally, if I recall. And it's kind of like an Among Us, Werewolves Within style gimmick, where it's like a role-playing experience where everyone gets a role, and you have to kind of like perform that. Some people are out to get you, some people are trying to work with you, or stuff like that. It's a very social game, and the reason I haven't played that, despite everyone telling me how good it is that I'm too scared. I'm already scared of playing Pavlov because everyone griefs me and bullies me.
You should say it's got radial voice chat.
That's why
like
it works.
old Splinter Cell games.
Yeah, so the way the voice chat works is it's a radial system, so when you getting close to someone in the level, you'll start to hear them quite softly, and then they'll get louder the closer you are. So you can literally just talk to people like that. You can have secret conversations or whatever. So there's a real social element to Pavlov that I'm too scared to dabble with.
Right.
But a lot of people love that about it. So no, I haven't played this game, but I need someone to like ease me into it, because I'm too scared to play with strangers.
Can I sneak up behind someone and then stay completely silent and then go, hey, what's up? And then take their ammo and then shoot them?
You could definitely do that.
Awesome. I'll be doing exactly that. I'd probably blow out the microphone, but we'll see.
If you want to do it, Scott, you could literally start crawling on your hands and knees in real life, and your character would do that in Pavlov, and then you'd make no sound, maybe, and then you'd be able to just shout at people down the mic. That's why I mute everyone.
I used to. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to go on about how awesome it was in Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow to take people by the neck and then say things to them as you kill them, but it was fun. Final question from J. Crow, who says, is it worth the price? It's more expensive than the console itself.
This is the issue, right? This is the issue, and it's something I sadly can't answer. For what you get for the money, it's worth the price for me. I'm not there like regretting that it doesn't have this feature or doesn't have that. Would I like the resolution to maybe be a bit better? Yes. Would I like the mirror effect to be lessened a little bit? I would. But if you look at the price of the PSVR 1, which was kind of not a rip-off, but it kind of undersold exactly what you needed, because the machine itself was about £350 in the UK, but you had to buy the camera on top of that, which knocked it up to 400, and then you had to, if you wanted to, get the Move controllers, which were, at the time for me, another £80. So you're looking at near 500 anywhere. With this, you don't need a camera, you just get the headset, you get the controllers, and the headset and the controllers feel premium. Like the controllers especially are outstanding, really good. The haptics are excellent. The what do you call like the trigger effect? The thing. I was going to say haptics again. It's not that, but the tactility of it, the way it kind of like when you're pulling back a bow, you can feel it. You know what I mean? When you're the tension, when you're shooting a gun, you can feel like the kick of the trigger while you're pulling the trigger. All of that is great. The eye tracking is excellent. The foveated rendering is really good. Like, I can't recommend.
I wish they'd launched with this first. This is clearly what it should have been back in 2017. I know the tech wasn't necessarily there even back then, but still.
So, like, the tech you're getting, I do think is worth the price. But just because it's worth the price doesn't mean it's not expensive. You know what I mean? Like you were saying, it is more than the console itself. So it kind of depends what you want from VR. If you're looking at this relative to other headsets, it's actually quite competitive for the price, but it just depends on what you want out of a VR headset, I suppose. Like, I've used a few before, and to me, this definitely feels like an upgrade, definitely worth the money with everything packaged in, but at the end of the day, it's an expensive piece of kit, and ultimately it's going to be down to you whether you feel comfortable buying a headset that you might not necessarily use all the time, and whether that justifies the money.
I think it's cool that at least this time there is a bigger lineup of games. Like, I should have said this at the very beginning, but we're not sponsored by Sony whatsoever for this video, and we just thought it'd be cool to talk about PlayStation VR 2.
We should probably say, and I will throw a disclaimer at the beginning. Yes. We didn't buy, well, I bought the headset, but the only game we got given from Sony was Call of the Mountain. Everything else was purchased in-house.
Yeah, totally. So I was just going to say, overall, in terms of making that buying decision, obviously £500 is still a hell of a lot of money regardless of which way you slice it, but at least there's more info out there as to the lineup of games that are there, the reviews that are out there, the footage that's out there. You can make a better decision this time, and I feel like tech-wise it does deliver more on what VR should be in almost like a pop culture sense.
Definitely,
compared to the PSVR 1.
Could I quickly talk about the launch lineup before we wrap this Q&A/review? Yes. The launch lineup is incredible, but it's only incredible if you haven't got another VR headset. If you're coming from PC VR, all of the games that I'm buzzing about today, you've probably already played really good versions of them. But if you're only a PSVR 1 owner, like I was, who's only maybe dabbled in a few other headsets, the Quest or whatever, the launch lineup is outstanding. You know, having Horizon, having Resident Evil, having Gran Turismo 7, having a Pistol Whip, having Pavlov, having a bunch more games that I need to get to. They've pretty much covered all bases in terms of genre. You got your roguelikes, you got your first-person shooters, you got your horror games, you got your adventure games, you got your climbing games.
Gran Turismo as well.
You got Gran Turismo, you got No Man's Sky. Like, you have all of these games that are available right now that, like I said, are going to take me through probably for at least 6 months, if not longer. So the way I split the launch lineup is, if you're coming from PC VR, you're probably thinking, well, where's the new games? If you're coming from PSVR 1, then you haven't played these titles like I hadn't. It's excellent. It really is way better than the PSVR 1's lineup. And, you know, like I said, if you haven't played these games, or you haven't played a good version of these games, it's even better than the lineup for like a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation 4. I just think there's so much there at launch, and so much to come this month, especially, that I'm personally looking forward to.
I like the way that they've rolled it out. I thought was quite trepidatious, like in terms of, you know, it's a bit like all the updates are on the PlayStation blog. For the most part, it's only really available, at least in the UK, on the PlayStation official website. But I quite like that working in their favor, because when people do check it out and you have conversations like this, and it is is more genuinely recommendable, and they're not trying to sell you on like the hype necessarily of this idea of plugging into a whole other reality and just letting the tech speak for itself to some degree. I think that can build a good solid word of mouth, and the general word of mouth around this, especially from people like you, is like, this is brilliant. This is exactly what it should be. The major hump, the big wall in the way of that is the price. But I guess we'll see how that changes over the year anyway. I have a feeling that's. I mean, Jeff Grubb was out there from Giant Bomb saying that the price isn't long for this world anyway.
Yes.
So it might be the case of just checking out some game footage and general videos like this, and then just hanging on for a little bit and seeing if it changes as the year rolls out. That's what I'm going to be doing.
That's what you're going to be doing,
They
man.
can shave a couple of $100 off for Old Tailford, then maybe I'll be getting in.
This is the thing, right? This is the thing, and not to spin this off into another video all about the price, but the price point is tough because I don't think they can even lower it. They might do, but if they lower it, I think they'll be taking a loss because, like I said, it is a competitive price point. If you look at some of the high-end headsets, you might be setting yourself back £1,000 rather than £500. You know what I mean? Like, this is an industry with a high point of entry, and that sucks, but I don't know how realistically they can get it down while still giving us a good experience, because if they did knock the price down and lowered the specs, you'd end up with a PSVR1 situation where you have the system that's good, but you're looking at the gulf between your system and the high-end stuff and the high-end games that are coming out, and you could never play something like Half-Life Alyx on the PSVR1 in the same way. So it's tough because I want more people to experience it, but I don't want Sony to sacrifice the tech that's inside, because this is so much better than the PSVR1 too.
Yeah,
PSVR1.
definitely. I'm curious because they've sold things at a loss before. The PlayStation 3 was notoriously sold at a loss for a long time before they eventually started recouping sales. So it's almost like it's like, how much do they believe in this? Like, they've put so much, like, this is a way more confident step forward for the realm of VR than PSVR1 was, where that thing just felt like a weird MacGyver system of what's left in the garage. I guess there's a couple of Move controllers, we'll use them, and seeing how it goes going forward. So yeah, for me, it depends how much they want to commit to the idea of PSVR being a part of the PlayStation brand going forward. Because it clearly is right now.
Yeah,
it's like as during the launch window and everything.
I will say, even if they don't, go all in with support, which would be an absolute travesty, I'm just so pleased that they've made a good bit of kit.
Yes.
Like a good bit of kit that acts as real competition to some of the high-end pieces and introduces interesting new ideas like the 4V rendering, like the eye tracking and stuff. Like the PSVR one was good, but it was very much an entry-level piece of kit. It was for people like me who never experienced it, who didn't have the money to buy a PC and buy the PC VR systems, and to kind of get a taste of it. This feels like such a confident step forward, and Sony kind of wanting to be a leader in the market rather than just an option in the market, which is really nice.
Yeah, which right now they are the leader of console VR. I mean, the comparison is like HoloLens never came out and Nintendo's version was a cardboard one. So they're doing pretty well in that specific sphere. But let us know what you think down in the comments below. If you picked up a PlayStation VR 2, how are you finding it so far? And are you excited or interested in the idea of VR stuff for the rest of the year and going forward? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.